Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is John Schaff. I'm the CEO and owner of Reality Bytes Incorporated. We are a managed IT provider that focuses on South Central Alberta services. We do have offices in Hanna, Drumheller, Calgary, and Medicine Hat. Our core focus at Reality Bytes is on IT efficiencies for your business. We do full IT management, right from simple break fix issues all the way up to quite complex engineering and network planning. We do also have a heavy leaning on IT security and IT compliance. And that's just to ensure that your business is both efficient and safe, which can be a tough balance. I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to give a brief introduction of who I am and our company. And now I'm going to hand over the mic and the video, so to speak, to Michael Reeves. He is an expert at Bitdefender, and he's going to be giving a presentation on cybersecurity in general, as well as some of the specific features that we can use out of the Bitdefender platform. So without too much ado, here's Michael.
Thanks so much. My name is Michael Reeves, and I'm a cloud security architect for Bitdefender, and it's my great pleasure this afternoon to talk to you about cybersecurity in your business, and specifically around staying one step ahead of the digital threats that you may be facing. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So our mission here at Bitdefender, and we are a security-focused vendor in this space. We are solely committed to helping secure our partners and their customers from both breaches as well as business disruptions. And we've been doing this since 2001, when our company was founded. We have about 1,600 employees worldwide. And one interesting fact about us, just as a corporation, is that over half of our employees are in engineering roles here at Bitdefender. So that's either systems engineers or developers or some sort of research and development or engineering type role. So we're a very engineering driven company, and we pride ourselves on making great products to bring to market. And one testament of this is about 38% of global cybersecurity firms actually use the Bitdefender technology in their own products that they bring to market. So many of the well-named vendors out there in this space that you're probably familiar with are actually using Bitdefender in their product that they bring to market. So we have a tremendous OEM business. We have around 500 million, almost close to 600 million endpoints now running the Bitdefender agent in the market today. So we're in over 150 countries, and about that 38% of cybersecurity firms represents about 130 different companies that are embedding our technology into their solutions that they bring to market. So let's talk about the problem in cybersecurity today that most partners are challenged with, and I just call it the problem, but it's basically being able to have visibility between the security control layers. This just presents such a huge challenge for MSPs to overcome, and just partners in general. The first area that we're going to talk about from a cybersecurity perspective, and this challenge, is just the lack of hardening and manual risk management tasks that most partners face in this area. The second area that we're going to talk about is ransomware and elusive threats that seem to bypass AV security controls. So we're going to talk about how to eliminate those types of threats in your environment and what value Bitdefender brings in that area. The third area we're going to talk about is just the reliance on reactive detection and response is just risky and inefficient. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. You can't have a security discussion without talking about email. Email is one of those platforms that seem to bypass and get straight to end users. That bypasses a lot of malware detection mechanisms. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the lack of visibility into how attacks happen. And it's really tough sometimes to demonstrate compliance if you have regulations that you have to adhere to. And then finally, we're going to end up talking about if you've deployed EDR or you're thinking about deploying an EDR security control, how to deal with alert fatigue and what seems to be a very high overhead cost associated with EDR technologies today. So those are the 6 areas that we're going to walk through. And then I'll take some questions if we have time. I think we're going to have time. We've got quite a bit of time allotted for this. So let's just go ahead and dive into the first challenge. So the first challenge is concerning reading insufficient hardening and manual risk management. One of the challenging areas of security is just an overall lack of visibility into not only what you're trying to secure from a data perspective, etc., but a lack of visibility in just in the overall risk management. I call it the attack zone or the vulnerabilities that may be exploited in a particular customer's environments. How do you see that when there's so many factors that go into that risk landscape, such as networking and operating system vulnerabilities, application vulnerabilities, even human risk vulnerabilities? How do you, is there something that can represent my attack surface in my customers' environments? And I am happy to say that there actually is a way within Bitdefender's Gravity Zone product to be able to visualize your customers and your own attack surface. So one of the things that we do at Bitdefender here is to help you identify areas of risk in your customers' environments. This is extremely powerful, and we break those risks down visually for you from a browser security perspective, a networking perspective, an operating system perspective, as well as an application perspective. And just recently, we just introduced a human risk perspective as well to this risk management dashboard. This is a completely interactive dashboard within Gravity Zone. All of the objects that you see on the screen can be interacted with. So for example, if you look in the middle there, you see top misconfigurations. This is from an operating system and networking perspective. Where are my misconfigurations in my customers' environments? Misconfigurations such as multiple local administrator passwords or accounts. You might have an SMB v3 vulnerability. And many of these risks can be mitigated directly right from a single click within Gravity Zone. So we're looking at operating systems, we're looking at applications that are running in your customers' environments. We map those applications and their vulnerable apps to their corresponding CVE, security risk, so that again, in a dashboard, very quickly, within seconds, you can see where your vulnerable apps are that you may need to patch. So this helps you to continuously assess, prioritize your environment. And from a security perspective, this is just fantastic. The latest area that I mentioned is that we are now getting into the area of human risks, which is usually the weakest link in security is ourselves. And so we're starting to map human behavior on the endpoint, not where we are looking at what you're typing on the screen or anything like that, but especially when it comes to web analysis, one of the areas of risk may be you have a user that's using the same password on 40 different websites. That's a security risk that, as a partner selling security services, you may want to know about. So that's where some training can come in for that particular customer, where you teach them, hey, you should probably have more than a few passwords that you use for websites, so that if your passwords are compromised, you limit the damaged area and limit the exposure there. So that's called risk endpoint analysis. It's a great tool built right into Gravity Zone. The other area along this lines is just the hardening that needs to take place. I liken this to making sure that you're locking your doors to your car when you go into a store, or locking the doors to your house when you leave on vacation. It's the idea where you minimize the ways of attack for something that you're trying to secure. So areas within Gravity Zone that help in this area are things like web filtering, the ability to control malicious websites from your users, the idea that you can have URL category filtering built right into Gravity Zone, where you can protect users from known malicious websites. That's built in. App control, the ability to map applications, and if they start exhibiting risky behavior, you have the ability through policy to block that behavior or quarantine that behavior, etc. And just simple things like device control, being able to limit the attack surface by maybe preventing certain devices from plugging into one of your customers' environments, unless it's a device that's authorized. That's what we call device control. That's also built into Gravity Zone. The idea of network attack defense is Gravity Zone, or the Bitdefender technology, looks at network traffic moving in and out of various endpoints, and it blocks things automatically, like brute force password stealing attempts, lateral movements within a customer environment. So again, limiting the attack surface from a network perspective. And finally, the idea of encryption. I think we're at a day now where encryption has become extremely important technology to think about deploying to protect data that lives on various devices, whether that device gets stolen, left in a taxi or an Uber, or just maybe is at home outside of the corporate network, where it may be vulnerable to attack because of the lack of security controls on the network in the home. You have the ability to encrypt the data, protect the data that's on that laptop from those with malicious intent. So the idea of reducing the attack surface is very important when it comes to securing your customers' environments. So let's look at the next area. And this is the idea of ransomware and just elusive threats bypassing traditional AV endpoint security. And this is where it becomes extremely important to have technologies that can work in coordination with each other to provide holistic defense against these very elusive ransomware type attacks. And I think you'll see why as we start looking at a real type of attack. So here's an attack that's very, very common when it comes to ransomware. And if you look on this screen, you have maybe an email with an infected attachment. That happens all the time. And what the reason why this is very, very challenging is a user executes that attachment and that Word document or Excel document starts up, and then embedded within that document is some sort of script that executes some command line bypassing your traditional AV type security controls. That command then triggers some sort of PowerShell, which then goes out to the internet. It downloads a malicious payload. It's then executed, and then files are encrypted, and then you get a ransomware note. It's very, very challenging for an endpoint-only security solution to deal with all of these various attack vectors in coordination with each other to be able to provide a defense for your customers. So let's look at how Bitdefender approaches this type of solution. The first thing is we have built-in email protection that's built into Gravity Zone that blocks malicious messages. It detonates those on a sandbox environment, looks at the payload that's in that attachment, and assigns a risk score, and based upon that risk score may block that Word attachment altogether if it is known malicious in nature. So the first protection is email. Let's say it's time-based, however, where the payload or the script that gets initiated, maybe it could be a couple of days or a couple of weeks later. There could be some time element. So the first block or the first risk analysis doesn't catch that. So then you have threat intelligence and machine learning identification on the Bitdefender environment. In other words, have we seen this anywhere else? Is the Word attachment acting as if it is an actual Word document, or is it behaving in a malicious type way? So we try to determine what is actually happening with that Word document. Then if it tries to execute command line, we have a process behavioral monitoring built right into Gravity Zone that start to see what that command line is actually executing. Then that PowerShell may ARP out to the web to download and execute some payload. We have a URL filtering mechanism built right into Gravity Zone, which blocks that type of behavior. So those are the first kind of big steps that we take. Then on top of that, we have other security controls that we bring to bear in this type of environment. We have a sandbox threat analysis that we add. We have our tunable machine learning advanced persistent threat technology that we call HyperDetect. We have a command line scanner that scans, identifies, and stops malicious command lines before they wreak havoc on your systems. And then finally, as we're working across these various layers, we give you analysis, whether that's in our EDR console that we'll talk about in a little bit, or in our analysis reports where we start to map this type of behavior against the MITRE security framework. So this is why when it comes to ransomware and advanced persistent threats and just modern day zero-day type of attacks, this is the type of coordinated response that's required to get the very low infection rates that Bitdefender has enjoyed over the last several years. We just we just don't see ransomware in a Bitdefender protection environment, because these are only some of the security controls that we have. When you look at Gravity Zone as a whole, we have over 30 different security layers that zero-day or advanced persistent threats or ransomware has to bypass to be able to execute any type of ransomware type of attack. So very, very important from a security perspective is to look at it holistically, and whether or not the solutions that you're bringing into your customers' environments can work in a coordinated fashion and a layered approach so that you can prevent these types of attacks. So that's why it's so important. The next area is in the idea of reactive detection and response. You know, I was on a call a couple of weeks ago where someone was talking about security, and their security architecture was such that their idea was, we're going to allow threats into the house as long as they don't do anything malicious. And I was sitting there kind of dumbfounded with that approach. And finally, I asked a question and said, you mean to tell me if you have a family and you're trying to protect that family, that you're going to let malicious actors in your house and roam around as long as they don't do anything malicious in your house, that's okay? And I said, that is not the approach that I would recommend. I would recommend, if there are malicious actors anywhere near your house, you want to, number one, keep them out of your yard. If they get into your yard, keep them out of your house. If they get into your house, lock them in a room, etc. So have multiple layers of security. And this idea of reliance on just reacting to everything that's happening is just not a great security architecture to implement. But I digress. Let's move on. So let's talk about the network. This has always been a challenge. The network has always been a challenge. And that's why there's so many networking defense controls that you can implement in one of your customers' environments. Whether that be secure routing, encrypting traffic on the network, secure switches, all of these types of firewalls. If you're in the cloud, security groups, all of those types of protections are extremely important, because there's a lot of network-based attacks. Well, the challenge is that since the beginning of this year, around the March timeframe, a lot of employees have now left the corporate networks and are now doing work, as I'm doing right now, from my home. And so Bitdefender does not have control over my home network. So now we are completely reliant, from a security architecture perspective, on the endpoint itself to provide network-based defense right from everyone's homes. And this has created a huge challenge for not just partners and MSPs, cloud providers, small businesses, etc. How does a endpoint then prevent attacks from the network? Things like brute force attacks, where you have a scanning technology that can scan my endpoint for vulnerabilities and then automatically attack those vulnerabilities from anywhere in the globe. We call that brute force attacks, or RDP vulnerabilities, or port scanning, or trying to steal credentials from the network. Those are really challenging types scenarios. And based upon those techniques, they can try to bypass traditional security controls by doing things like disabling antivirus, or deploying ransomware remotely, or moving laterally within an organization using credentials that are obtained on the endpoint. They can exfiltrate data out of the organization. So if they get a hold of my credentials, whatever access I have in the corporation, they now have if they're able to use those credentials in any way. So they're able to exfiltrate data using my credentials. So they can also, and this has become a huge problem, the end of last year and moving into this year, is they're infecting MSP customers using RMMs and PSA tools and things like that, where they get administrative access now to MSP environments, and they're able to move laterally using those tools. Becomes a very, very challenging problem to solve. So Bitdefender comes in this area where we have built right into our policy out of the box the idea and the security control that we call network attack defense. But basically what this is doing is, this is policy based, and it stops network based attacks before they begin. So the idea of brute force attacks or password stealers or port scans that may happen across the home network, botnets, things like that, we are scanning all incoming and outgoing traffic, lateral traffic within the organization, and we shut it down. If it's anomalous in behavior, you by policy can just block it, as you see on the screen. And we recommend all of those areas to be blocked right from the network. So what that does is that moves your security architecture from being reactive in nature to just proactive, and I just want to stop it before it gets started. So that's network attack defense. Really, really good architecture to take a look at, especially with all of the work from home type security environments that companies are faced with now. Let's talk about email. Like I said at the beginning, any security conversation should absolutely start with email. Email malware is growing exponentially. Scams are becoming very, very prolific in the environments. So how do we protect that? Well, email is always the #1 attack vector. It has ever since they've been studying malware over the internet. Email is always #1. Most malware is delivered via email. It is a payload that comes in via email. This idea of business email compromise has become a huge, critical, important security consideration now. We'll talk a little bit about what that is, but very, very difficult to defend against unless you have the right security architecture in place. And advanced attacks nowadays, this area is continuing to be very prolific because it works. And so those with malicious intent on your environment or against your customers' environments, this is their easiest route to market to get what they need from you and from the companies that you are helping to secure. So what is this business email compromise? This is where someone who is well known within an organization, maybe it's a CEO, CFO, maybe it's just a small business owner, and they have somebody who handles their financial transactions for them. It could be an office manager. It could be a CFO. It could be anyone with access to money. And what they do is they craft an email that's supposedly coming from an executive owner, somebody who needs that money, and ask this person with access to the finances to transfer money into an account and do it now. This is very, very, this is basically social engineering. In this particular case, Anne is under pressure because Paul, the CEO of the company has asked her to transfer this money immediately. And so, and these are crafted in such a way that if Anna's not paying attention, or maybe she's gets this email in the middle of doing something, she doesn't stop and think. And it's not on her, because these emails look exactly like the company's emails. And she wire transfers the money, and then the money's gone. And this actually, studies have shown this actually accounts for about 0.5 to 1% of all the email that's floating around the internet. So about 1 in every 100, 200 messages is actually a business email compromise. So this is a very, very important security topic to cover. And the way that you defend against this is products like Bitdefender Gravity Zone email security, where we actually map real accounts, real AD accounts for those that have that should have access to that money, whether that's from Paul Smith, the CEO, the CFO, etc. We map their accounts, and so only their account can originate an email asking for money. So it's a security control where if you try to spoof that email address, make it look like an email, but that email originates from somewhere else other than that Paul Smith who should have access to that, we deny that. We block it. We quarantine it for further investigation. So what it does is it uses multiple scanning technologies, and it accurately stops spam, phishing, ransomware, advanced attacks, including this business email compromise. And this is built right into Gravity Zone. Really, really important security attack vector that you need to think about from a security perspective. Then we have the idea of just the lack of visibility into how attacks happen. And it's really tough to show compliance sometimes if you have regulations that you need to adhere to. How do you demonstrate how an attack happens, what the root cause of that attack was, how we responded, or how our security portfolio responded to that particular attack? How do we do this? Well, I would like to suggest that you look into, if you already have Gravity Zone, you look into an add-on to Gravity Zone that's built right into the UI that you're familiar with. And it's basically turning on our incident manager, or what's called Bitdefender Edr. What this does, what our EDR does, is it does two things. It gives you a full attack chain visualization, all of the objects, all of the scripts that are run, all of the processes that are executed, all of the registry objects that were modified in a particular attack. It'll show you where Bitdefender stopped that particular attack. It'll give you kind of an impact, what endpoints, what objects in the environment were identified as being impacted by that attack. And it'll also show you gaps in protection. It could be an operating system vulnerability that it took advantage of. So it shows you the incident impact to support compliance. It gives you full attack chain visualization. And for those that are not security expert, it gives you kind of guided an investigation. In other words, what does Bitdefender say you should do about this particular situation? So, and it gives you the ability to take action, whether that's quarantining a file, adding a process or a file to a block list. It could be that this particular incident is benign in nature. Maybe it's a custom application that behaves in certain malicious ways, but it's known, and we want to add to an exception list. You could do that right from Bitdefender Edr just by clicking that button that you see up on the top far right, where you want to add the file to the exception so Bitdefender ignores it. This really brings down your false positives. But think about from a guided perspective. This tells you what is the attack vector or seeming attack vector. In this particular case, it's an Office application that started an executable. And then that executable maybe initiated some sort of PowerShell that went out and did domain discovery. That could be benign in nature, or it could be malicious. And you have the ability, we give you the tools to determine what happened, and then we give you recommendations on what to do about that. That is what attack chain visibility, why it is so important, and the ability to respond if you need to respond. All of this technology is built right into Gravity Zone. And finally, let's look at the challenge number 6, and specifically, this is addressed to those that maybe have already deployed an EDR solution. And when I say alert fatigue and high overhead, you're probably going, you're absolutely right. My life has been turned upside down by an EDR technology that I've deployed, and all my technicians are doing all day is looking at alerts on a screen, and trying to prioritize those, see which ones are real, see which ones are just overhead. That is a huge challenge in the security space nowadays, as partners are starting to deploy EDR type technologies. So how does Bitdefender address this type of challenge? The first area is a technology that we patented way about, I think about 10 years ago or so, where it's looking at anomaly defense, where Bitdefender goes into an environment and starts to, through our machine learning and AI engines, start to create normal baseline patterns that are usual activities within a customer's environments. And then once that baseline is determined, then our engines start to turn towards the anomalies in that baseline detection. So what that does is, if you don't have a technology that does this and everything becomes an alert, then you start to deal with alert fatigue. In the Bitdefender world, you don't really have a lot of that, because we have this technology called Anomaly Defense, where we are just showing you anomalies in the environments. And what this does is this reduces false positives. It helps to protect custom applications that may behave in some risky type manners. And we then start to show you just the anomalous behaviors. And along with that, we give you the ability, let's say that it still trips one of our protection mechanisms, and we show it to you. We show you all of the objects associated with that particular threat. We give you the ability, again, with a single click to, in the Gravity Zone management interface, to exclude that from further investigation or further alerting. So our false positive rate for EDR is very, very low once it tunes the environment from an AI machine learning perspective, and you're able to exclude a lot of the known benign behavior in your customers' environments. So it really focuses in on incident visualization. It's a very low overhead EDR that's integrated with the Bitdefender protection mechanisms and security controls. And it gives you just a simple guided response for investigations if that's something that you need to do. So we've looked at these 6 different areas in security. We've looked at hardening, manual risk management, how you want to become more automated and you want to harden your customers' environments to shrink the attack surface that you have to deal with from a security perspective. We've talked about ransomware and elusive threats, bypassing AV. We've talked about reactive detection and response. It's just risky. Why not just keep those malicious actors out of your customers' environments? Don't let them in and let them roam around as long as they're not doing anything harmful. We talked about email. We've talked about just a lack of visibility into both the attack surface in your customers' environments, as well as real or maybe benign processes that may be coming through an EDR console as an attack. How do you mitigate those? And then we talked about EDR alert fatigue and high overhead. So those are the areas that just present some challenges. I hope that's been beneficial to you. I just want to close by talking about our cloud security suite that is available through Reality Bytes. It is the most comprehensive security suite in the globe today, bar none. We have very mature machine learning algorithms and behavioral technologies. We introduced machine learning and AI back in 2008. So we are going on year 12 in this. We've introduced what I call machine learning 2.0, the ability to actually tune our machine learning engine to your customers' environments. Very, very unique capability in this. We have all of the security controls that you see on the screen in a single console, which we call Gravity Zone, and a single agent that gets deployed on an endpoint. So from that single agent, single console architecture, which is multi-tenant in its architecture, you have all of the security controls available to you, and it's just a turn on, turn off in a policy to enable these security protections for your customers' environments. It's a completely open platform, so you can integrate and manipulate our Gravity Zone platform via REST APIs. So you can integrate this with an RMM PSA tool, a SIEM, or other types of security platforms, including Defender ATP. So if you're a Microsoft shop and maybe you want to protect Mac and Linux and integrate them into the ATP security console, you can do that. So you can protect your Mac and Linux with Gravity Zone, with Bitdefender technology, and use Windows Defender ATP for your Windows. Have a integrated security console in Microsoft, and that works well from an architectural standpoint as well. So very, very easy to integrate into other platforms, and it gives you the opportunity to grow your revenue as a partner, where maybe you have a customer that wants more than just the included security modules that you see there in black that we've talked about. Maybe they do need full disk encryption. Maybe they're subject to some sort of compliance regulation, and they need to encrypt. Why not use BitLocker, FileVault, integrate that into your security architecture through Gravity Zone? Very, very simple turn on, turn off type capability in a policy. You can add email, you can add patch management, you can add EDR and advanced threat security, all within the same Gravity Zone security console. So that is about all I have. I want to thank you for your time, and I am open for questions if there are any.
Thanks, Michael. Really appreciate it. I mean, it's a ton of technical information, and
yeah,
I'm sure everybody's feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But one question I have is regarding the end users in your organization. So if you're a business owner,
Yep.
you know, one of our existing clients or just someone attending, what is some recommendations you have on end user training? Like, do you recommend having a process in place for that, or some kind of a program in place for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is more to come. Stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks or so. Bitdefender may be announcing something in the area of that. So absolutely, security training is really important. It is vital. Humans are usually the weakest area of security for most organizations. So just making them aware of, like, for example, how to respond to emails that look strange, or making sure that when you are going and browsing in websites, making sure that you are actually on the website that you want to be on, rather than some redirect to maybe a malicious site. There's lots of training available. And so, yeah, I would absolutely encourage security training for customers and just for people. There's a lot of great stuff on YouTube. Is a
Okay.
great area that can be used to train people. I know that I've asked my I've got 3 kids, so they've all been through security training, and we actually used YouTube for that. There's some great videos there just to make them aware that what they're doing online has some pretty far-reaching impacts for them, not only now, but maybe in their future. So, yeah, great question.
Okay, another question I have from the Q&A, and if anybody has questions, just go ahead and type them into the Q&A screen in your browser window there. So one of the questions is, when someone sends a phishing attempt to your inbox as one of your contacts, is it sent from one of your contacts, or is the address a bit off?
Yeah, the address is a bit off, but it's not so far off. You know, if you're like most people, including myself, and we get here at Bitdefender, we get tested on this periodically, but most of us are not really looking at uh, the uh, the from field in an email really closely. What we're looking at is their signature. We're looking at, you know, is it addressed to me or not? So we're not paying attention. So if there's a letter off, or maybe there's a dash where there shouldn't be, and it's coming from a source other than who we think it is, it's really easy to be tricked, especially nowadays, where you know, if you're like me, or even my kids nowadays, they're getting 50 emails a day from their friends and from their teachers and all that. And so we've gotten into that. We've gotten used to dealing with a lot of volume, and when we do that, we bypass some of the very security type behaviors that we may not, or that we may implement if we had like 5 emails a day. If I got 5 emails a day, I would pay much more attention to who's sending me the email other than looking at their signature, than I would if I get like 200 messages a day. So it's a constant problem, and absolutely.
Excellent. If anyone else has questions, go ahead and type them into the Q&A. Just looking through here. addressed quite a few already.
Okay.
One I had already sort of answered. It just says, do we still have to be smart about what we click on, even if we have Bitdefender installed?
Yes. Yep. The answer to that is absolutely. And what's especially depending on the email technology that you have that you're defended with, sometimes they'll well, most modern day email security will actually change the URL link that you actually click on. And they do that for a reason. What they do is they actually, when you click on that link in an email, if you have, for example, like a Bitdefender email security product that you're protected with, or a similar type product on the market, when you click, you're actually redirected to their platform. Like, for example, you'll be redirected to the Bitdefender platform. And then from there, the target that you want to go to, where whatever that URL is referencing, it will be scanned at the time of click for any malicious type behavior. And we call that URL redirect. And that's just another protection mechanism. If you're not protected by an email security product, that URL can take you anywhere, and that site could be a benign site or it could be a malicious site, and you'll have no idea, especially if it's those short links or so yeah, just be aware of what you're clicking on. Absolutely. Even
I,
on websites, be very,
I've
very aware.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot with especially in the time of COVID right now, with
Yes.
people sharing files through
Yes.
systems such as Dropbox,
Yep.
even OneDrive or Google Drive. They're a little more, sorry, a little less reluctant to, when clicking on things, or maybe using the wrong terminology there.
Yeah.
They're clicking on links thinking that it's a coworker's shared file, because there's so much of this file sharing through the cloud going on with everyone working from home or working remotely. So that web filtering feature is very big.
Yes.
I was wondering too if you could touch a little bit on the Sandbox Analyzer, if you have
Yeah.
a little bit of information on that, just quite how that works.
You bet. So the sandboxing technology is it's hosted on a cloud provider. It's they're actually Bitdefender virtual machines running in a cloud platform that backends Gravity Zone. And what they are machines that are running operating systems that are similar to your operating system that you upload a file or an application or whatever to. So what happens is, based upon policy, you can either have Bitdefender automatically upload an object that is unknown, because it's only useful really for unknown type objects. If it's already known, it already has a risk score assigned to it. Machine learning and AI engines have already examined it, etc. But let's say you have an unknown file or object. It gets uploaded into the sandbox and actually detonated. So it's actually executed. And when that execution takes place, there are analytics tools that look at all of the behavior of that object in a real life, let's say, Windows environment. And then based upon that behavior, so in other words, what processes does it spawn? What registry entries does it modify or create or use, etc. And then based upon that, in Gravity Zone, you'll see a report on exactly what that object does. And then based upon the policy settings that you have in Gravity Zone, you determine whether or not are we going to quarantine it? Are we going to block it? What are we going to do if it exhibits malicious behavior? And that's all done by policy. And so that's the sandboxing type technologies. It's used in our email solution as well as the endpoint solution, where you want an area to detonate unknown objects rather than the system that you're working on. Because if you detonate something that is malicious in nature, you've just possibly compromised your system. It's better to compromise the Bitdefender isolated environment than to compromise anything that actually holds real data that you want to protect. So, great question.
Okay, and so just in summary, if Sandbox Analyzer is something a person has enabled, when they click on an attached document in an email, yep, that document's going, this is all happening behind the scenes to the end user, but correct, they click on the file in Outlook, it's submitting that file to the Bitdefender yep, cloud, running it in a sandbox environment, yep, watching all the things that happen when that file runs. Yes. And if it's cleared from that, then and only then it lets the client run that file or that document.
Yeah, great summary. That is one way that you can run it. Again, it's all by policy. The beginning of that policy in the management UI, you'll see two buttons. One is, and it explains it right in the management UI. The first is, do you want the end user to have access to the object before we run the sandbox detonation? That's option number one. In that particular case, when they click on the object, it is running on their local system and we're copying it up to the sandbox and running it there. So you can choose whether or not the end user has access to the object before that sandbox is run. Option number two, which I recommend from a security perspective, but again, it does cause the end user to wait for a couple of minutes on the high end. On the long-term end of that is a couple of minutes. The option number two is the end user, when they click on it, it doesn't run on their system. It'll just clock and wait for the detonation to happen on the sandbox before it actually runs locally. So there's both of those options within Gravity Zone. And it's done via policy. Excellent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. One more question. Can you download anything malicious from the Microsoft App Store or the App Store off of your phone?
Possibly, yes. Nothing is foolproof. However, I will say that they've gotten way better over time at defending and running applications through app stores because that's one of the values actually that app stores bring to both the mobile environment as well as to just any Windows type environments, is when there's always a possibility that something can slip through the cracks, but by and large, if you're getting it from the Microsoft site or the Apple site or the Google site, it's been vetted pretty well by their own security. I mean, there's a huge testing that has to go on. You have to attest to certain things. The danger that what I see is that there are applications that are loaded, let's say, on mobile devices that do not come from published app stores. They're what's called side loaded. So they are, you're sent a link and then you click on the link, you download a game or something of that nature. Those applications absolutely can have malicious content within it. And I would definitely watch out for any applications that aren't published on those major app stores. That would be my recommendation. In fact, in my previous job, I used to go around and hack into people's phones live. And the easiest way to do that is to have them download a side-loaded app, and you have access to everything on their phone. Very, very easy to do. And it just was raising awareness of protecting the information that goes onto your phone, and making sure that you get it directly from the platform's app store, where you have a better chance of protection in that area.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions. Did you have any other sort of closing comments, Michael, or should we?
No, I mean, just we're happy to be partnering with you guys. I'm really excited to see you guys talking about security. It's something that is really, really critical nowadays, especially with COVID. I would also encourage your users to look into home-based networking protection. So areas such as secure Wi-Fi routers, things like that for your home, rather than depending 100% on endpoint type detection and protection methods. I think it was Netgear has now embedded the Bitdefender technology into their routers. I think it's called the Armor line of security routers. But it's looking at your home wireless access points. As you think about defending your home nowadays, it's not just laptops and phones that are connected to your network. It could be your Ring devices, your TV, your refrigerator. Heck, I'm hoping to get a smoker for Christmas this year, a Traeger smoker. And that thing connects to the wireless network now, so I can control it with an app on my phone. All of those devices, once they get an IP address associated with them, they are vulnerable. So looking at maybe some wireless defense for your home is something to look for over the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, another one I'll add to that is light bulbs. Because you know, you can get a lot of these smart bulbs off of Amazon that just connect directly to your Wi-Fi. They get an IP address, and the unfortunate part of a lot of these IoT devices is that they don't really put security at the forefront or at all. So it's really important to secure those things in some other fashion, like what you're talking about. So
yeah, I mean, now thermostats are controlled. And it might not be, it might be just someone trying to, to create havoc in your home. Maybe you go on vacation and someone takes over the thermostat in your house and either turns it up, or way down, or, if they have access to your refrigerator, they can turn, your freezer off, those types of things. It might be fun in games, but it could have some serious ramifications. So looking at extending the security in your home to the network is, I think, really important moving forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned fridges, and there's actually a documented, it's been around now for several years actually, that it's still floating around, is a botnet that consists of about 750,000 internet connected fridges, and that is sending out spam email, and it's been going on for literally years. But these refrigerators are not able to be patched, so your smart fridge is just sitting there spamming the globe with email. So you know, it's kind of ironic, I guess, but it's one of the things that we need to all think about in 2020 and beyond.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so. Well, I think I'll leave it at that. I really
Okay.
appreciate your time, Michael, and everyone that's attended today. Thank you so much for joining. This will be a recorded presentation, so we'll get it up on our YouTube channel shortly. So if you missed some of it or just want to refer back to it, it'll be accessible to you shortly, probably within the next 24 hours or so. We'll have it up on our YouTube channel. So thanks again, Michael, for your time today, and
You're
thanks
welcome.
everyone for joining. And
All righty.
have
Take care.
a great day. Thank you.
See ya.